So I want you to download this vector practice worksheet. It's a .ai file or an Illustrator file. Double click that, it'll automatically open for you. I'm going to save two different versions, one that is going to be in a modern version and one that's going to be in a legacy format. So this is going to be one big window for those who have really older versions of Adobe Illustrator. Make sure you open up the one that says new if you have a Adobe Creative Cloud version from the last couple years. So I just wanted to do one that for people who have a 10-year-old version or something really old, that I at least have a legacy kind of file for you. But most of you guys are going to be able to open the new document, and it's going to be in artboard. So we have 6 different artboards. There's even a little bonus artboard that we're going to do some work with grids. If we have a little time left over, we're going to be able to work through that together. But I hope to work through this in just a quick hour and a half. We're going to go at a nice steady pace. We're going to start with simple shapes. We're going to move into complex shapes. We're going to do some pen tool introduction and pen tool practice. Of course, the pen tool is great paired with the curvature tool, so we're going to be learning those together. Then we're going to do a little pen tool practice by tracing some simple shapes and then much more complex shapes. Then we're going to learn the shape builder tool, and we're going to be able to do all these little icons and graphics. We're going to work with the width tool, which is really handy for logo design. And the offset path tool, we're going to be using that in several instances, not only with shapes, but also with typography. And we're going to just do some overall practice. We have 2 different logo designs. One that's kind of complex, I guess more of a symbol or an illustration than a logo design. So we're going to do this cute little illustration. It's going to require us to use all the tools that we've learned in the worksheet prior. And then lastly, if we have a chance, I would love to get to grids. Even have some fun pixel art we can do, just kind of learning how to use the snap to grid and grid feature to create some geometric shapes. So now that you have your sheet open, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the layering system. It's going to work like any other layering system in Adobe. So if you're used to Photoshop, you're going to be right at home with the layering system. So this layer, and you can go ahead and toggle off your visibility. This layer is the base layer and it's locked. So this is what we're going to be tracing over. So this is locked so you don't accidentally shift around a shape and it gets all over the place. So this is going to be the student layer. This is where you're going to be drawing. You're going to be doing your tracing. So make sure your student layer is selected. And we're going to just start with the ellipse tool. So this is very, very basic stuff. Ellipse tool is a simple shape, just like in Photoshop or any other Adobe program. We're going to just hold down on the rectangle tool and we're going to go down to the ellipse tool. And so there's a little thing in Adobe Illustrator. So if you hold down the Shift button and click and drag, you can create a perfectly dimensional circle. And right now, you can go right down to this area. And there's 2 things we need to talk about. There's a stroke and a fill. And we just need to make sure we click this little button and we switch it to a fill. So we can switch it to stroke, which is going to be this little stroke here. Or we can, instead of a stroke, we can do a fill. So we're just going to do a simple fill. And you notice how it's kind of snapping. It's not very smooth. It tends to be snapping. Anytime you kind of have that and you don't feel like you have perfect control over where it is being placed, just make sure you go up to view and make sure your the snap to grid and snap to pixel are checked off, especially when it comes to doing these complex shapes. We're going to use that later. But for right now, just make sure snap to grid is turned off, and usually by default it is. So now you see how smooth it is. I'm able to place it anywhere on the artboard. So we're going to place over that, and we can pick kind of a shade. We can go do purple would be our complete color. So whatever we're tracing, we can do a nice solid color over there. So if I don't hold the Shift button on a shape, I can kind of not scale dimensionally, but I can kind of have more control over the dimensions of the shape. So I'm going to grab our Move tool right here, and we're going to be going over keyboard shortcuts in a little bit. So if you want to learn those keyboard shortcuts, we're going to do that a little bit later. But for right now, I'm just getting the Move tool and just being able to shift this around and stretch it out. So I didn't hold Shift, and then I held Shift for that ellipse tool. So simple enough, very basic tools. We're going to go over here, and now we're going to do the rectangle tool. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and drag because I want a perfect square. And I want to be able to rotate this. So I'm going to go over to the corner, just like Photoshop, and I'm going to be able to move it all the way to 45 degrees. And just going to drag it over. I'm going to hold down Shift so I can scale dimensionally. If I didn't hold down Shift, it's going to go all over the place. I'm just going to make sure I trace right right over what we have here and just created a simple diamond. We started off simple, and each step we do, each page we do, is going to get increasingly a little bit more complicated as we move through this tracing sheet. So now we're going to get a polygon tool, so it's the same thing in the same category. And now I'm going to be practicing strokes. So this is a fill. So let's go ahead and do our toggle, and let's toggle this to a stroke. And let's do varying stroke widths, or thicknesses. So we're going to get our stroke tool right here, and let's kind of match the thickness. Let's make it a little thicker, just like that. And we're going to copy this. We're going to hold down the Option and drag for a quick copy, or you could just do Command-C, Command-V for copy and paste, or you can do it the long way and go to Edit, Copy and Paste, however you feel comfortable making a duplicate. But I like to hold down Option and drag because it really speeds up my workflow. So now this is going to be a lot skinnier, so let's reduce the stroke weight. I'm in my stroke panel. If you don't see a stroke panel, just make sure you go up to Window and you can call it out. So let's make sure it matches pretty close. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're really just practicing here. Let's hold down Option and drag again and make this a little bit thicker. So just practicing with strokes and making them thicker and thinner. And also we want to practice the Align tool, because right now it's pretty close, but there's not equal alignment among all three strokes. So let's select all three. So I'm going to select the middle one, hold down the Shift button, click and select the second one. I am continuing to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to select all three. And I'm going to go up to our alignment panel. And you may have your own panel over here, or you can also access the Align panel up top. So whatever you feel comfortable with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do Center Align all the way across. So this is a horizontal align center. I'm doing all the center aligns: vertical align center, vertical distribute center, and horizontal distribute center. So I'm doing all the center alignments, and now we know that all three shapes are perfectly in center, vertically, horizontally, in all ways. So now we have all that together. So let's talk about rounded corners. Rounded corners was introduced as a newer tool a couple of years ago, I believe 3 or 4 years ago. So maybe 2016 and beyond, those versions will have this nice built-in rounded corner feature. We're going to do the star tool next, just going down the line, the list of basic shapes. Let's flip that to a fill. We're going to try to match the corners here. So you notice how it has nice rounded corners. What we're going to do is we're going to select our direct selection tool. There's also a keyboard shortcut A, don't worry about keyboard shortcuts right now. We're just going to select the tools manually. This is called the direct selection tool, and we're going to be able to directly select what are called anchor points. So these are all little anchor points that we can click and maneuver with the direct selection tool. So when we do this, we'll have access to these little corners. And if you have a very old version of Illustrator, you may not have this. It's a very handy tool that they've updated. What we're going to do is we're just going to click on any of them just once and drag. And you notice how all the corners go together, just like that. They all do it at the same time. Just click and release, and we have kind of a rounded star. Of course, we can reduce the size to match it up. Doesn't have to be perfect though. This is just for practice. And let's try to do it, but only do a few corners at a time. So we're going to get a rectangle tool. We're going to kind of get this basic shape. Okay, so now I can kind of shift it over so I can kind of see what the original shape was. So I can click and hold on these corners, and it's going to do a complete round on all sides. Or if I click twice, once, and then once again, you'll notice it kind of has this little icon there. So now I'm going to be able to access just one point at a time. So I'm just going to do one corner, and then I'm going to click again, and you notice that little icon comes up. Now I have access to just one corner at a time instead of having to do all of them. So that's how you use rounded corners. And I need to probably round that a little more. So I'm going to get my direct selection tool, click, hold, click, and hold to match it up. It's pretty close. And it looks like this one got accidentally done. So I'm just going to click once, wait till I get that icon, and then I can just sharpen that corner. I'm glad that happened, so now I can practice a little more. Boop. Just like that. So now we created a two rounded corners and two sharp corners.